Well, once again, we are looking at quantitative data analysis. This is a methodology in which you can pick and select as your way you go about doing your research for your dissertation. And so in this mini lecture, we're going to cover a little bit of further drill down in the information from your textbook on how do you go about looking at quantitative data analysis, and even thinking through the schematic as it represents your sample population. How will you configure chapter 4 and the resources and the data that you collect along the way, whether that's through surveys or other valid instruments that are employed in chapter 3 and 4. So what I would like to do is explain what quantitative analysis is. And simply, it's social data converted into numerical form of statistics. And so you're taking the information from, say, a survey, and you're collecting it all together, and you're giving a value set. So the number becomes really important to the reader that is reading through your dissertation proposal and your finality of your research. So let's take this for example. I take 56% of the sample population says this in regards to question number 4 of the survey that was employed for this research. So you're using quantitative data and using it in a very descriptive or explanatory way. Let's say 20% of the respondents said this in regards to questionnaire number 5. Again, you're representing that sample piece and quantifying by the number in terms of percentage or mean or mode, and the list continues as we work through this mini lecture. So data will consider one or two or several variables at a time, depending on what you're looking at and what your population has been selected as in terms of gender, could be cultural group, ethnicity, and again, you're quantifying the total sample population that you have gathered up to this point. Now, quantification of data is simply using a computer software and collecting all of the data information into this statistical software and allowing the software to help you process the amount of the data that you are extracting. Now, there's SPSS is a statistical software that you can use, tends to be expensive. Others have used Excel as another happy medium ground where you already have it on your computer, and can you manipulate the data in such a way to show this in graph, table, and other regression format to help the reader see where the trends are at, or where the population is showing the emergent themes that are coming out of that particular data set. So in addition, the researcher here will use surveys to capture the variables of the population, and then you'll assign appropriate fields in the software to represent that sample or population space. Now let me just say this, that there is data coding similar to qualitative design sets, and we won't get into that specifically. We'll do that on another mini lecture, but just know that you're doing data coding similar to qualitative design sets as well. So let me just try to give you a definition here. It's a numerical representation. The difference between quantitative and qualitative is this, that a number in qualitative approach is simply a placeholder, where in quantitative it actually has meaning and weight. Now that doesn't mean you can't talk about averages in a qualitative design set. It's not going to be the driver. We do want to know in qualitative design who your population is, and so it might be helpful to explain that the average age of my sample population is 36. Again, that's not going to be the driver, but it's helpful to note that that exists within your population sample, that's the average age. Or let's say you're polling, you're not polling, but you are looking at a group of pastors, and they represent a different cross spectrum of ages and generations. Again, you're just showing it that here's the average age, and we need to know this because it's helpful to see the different perceptions that come from this age group. But again, the wordings and the descriptors that the passers are using at that point become the emergent themes that you're wanting to relay back to as a qualitative design set, not a quantitative. So in quantitative, you're looking at the phenomenon from a numerical value, the percentage of the group that you're studying. Let's say 300 people were sampled in a survey. You're wanting to know the percentage in regards to that particular surveyed question number 10, number 12, and so on. So I hope that helps you understand the phenomenon, how you're explaining. You're explaining in percentage in number formatting rather than in words or in descriptors. Now this is how you would do it, because you get to what we call code categories. And similarly in qualitative design, you are looking at categories or emergent themes. The same is true for quantitative, but you are assigning an X. So many say this about tuition is too high. So many are saying this about the cost of dorm rooms. But notice how there are similar themes that have emerged from this particular survey about student life and those who are associated with a college. Again, I've attached a financial concern, a problem that emerges for these particular students. Concern for high tuition, concern that the cost of dorms are way too high, books are costing too much, and there's not enough scholarships that are available for them. So again, the theme would be financial concerns, but I am particularly concerned about how many of my respondents said that the scholarships and financial aid is not available to them. And so I began marking it, and then I relay back in my chapter 4 the amount of percentages that may take place for this particular set of questions within my questionnaires. So I begin to build out my codes, as you can see in my table format here. Again, I'm still not getting to the quantitative. I'm looking for that number. How many represent the tuition is too high? Are there 40? Are there 50? You'll have to figure that out as you work through each of your surveys, or the valid instrument that you're using for your quantitative design methodology. But notice again, I begin to code and assign those codes to the different stems or idea chart here, to just know that, okay, this might relate academically, it might relate administratively, or it actually is connected to the idea of facilities. Notice that at the bottom here, I have X'd administrative and facilities. I'm going to have to drill that out some more based on the questions that I've asked in my instrument, and just know that eventually it might be facilities only, or it might be an administrative function that I need to work through. I can also go the route of what we call codebook construction, where codes are represented as attributes and the variables are selected therein. And so we begin to build this database of words and codes. And so, for example, denom tradition is a stem, and then I build attendance based off how many denominations I'm sampling and where people are assigning themselves religiously in their faith and practice. So we determine religious services attendance by the amount of respondents that come to a worship service. And so we will assign the word attend as the main stem to that sample group. So I hope you're seeing how that is building out in what we call a quantitative methodology. Notice the difference between qualitative as we move to into the future, what a qualitative design set is. So we move from code book construction to data entry. We're now putting the materials that we're collecting from our surveys, and we're building this into our statistical software. Now we could use Excel, and if you're savvy at Excel, you might want to use that. And again, quantitative is really helpful for a large sampling that you're going to pull. And then from there, you begin to dissect each question from a survey instrument that is a valid instrument, already deployed, already been tested by another maybe dissertation or another group, and they've done the hard work for you. And again, you deploy that out, and then you collect it based back on your problem statement that emerges in chapter 1. But you begin to build that data entry, and you begin to dissect the questionnaires and the surveys that you have sent out to your sample group. Now there is what we call, we move from the analysis here of the data entry into what we call univariate analysis. And this is the distribution level of determining single variables versus multiple variables. And again, you begin to drill down on exactly who my gender is, for example, is how am I going to segue between female and male genders? Are they married? Again, it's a univariate analysis. I'm looking at one particular stem at this point, and so we begin to number the amount of married, divorced, single, widow, or widower as it relates to our sample population. I want to know this within quantitative. I may want to know this in qualitative depending on, again, what am I studying? And your mentor will be able to help you through that and work through those processes to its finality, and hopefully it will serve as a beneficial validity statement for your methodology. Again, frequency of distribution, we're looking at percentages here. How far do your respondents say? What are they saying in regards to men are saying this, women are saying this, and so you then put that in explanation form for your readers to understand the information at hand. Now, central tendency also comes into play where I'm representing a data analysis here in a form of averages. So some of you really like averages, and you can explain averages well, and so that measures, again, central tendency. So we see this often in our sports world, especially in the field of baseball, and I love baseball, and I love to see high averages. So Frank Thomas batted at 343. That was his average. Yay! But his slugging average talks about 454, and that looks at his RBIs and his overall home run equation. And again, we're looking at averages. So if you can work with averages, then statistical query there is going to be really helpful in setting up tables and showing us the average or central tendency within a particular population. Again, here's a sample way of doing it. I take my different ages, 13 all the way down to 19, and then who is within my sample population? Well, age 13 is I have 3, I have 14, I have 4, and I just move down this table, and you begin to see, okay, I'm going to find eventually the central tendency here, what my average age might be. So let's just kind of work through this in a statistical query. So I have 31 total subjects here that I'm representing as part of my sample. What then is the modal age variance that I'm looking at? Well, looking at 16 as the greatest number slot. See, there's 8 responding to that. So I'm going to take that as the highest, and I can use that in a modal statistical analysis. Now, it might even be helpful to even drill down even some more and look at the sum total of 492, and I'm going to work through that in a statistical mathematical form, taking all the way from the top from number 13 of the age times the 3 that represent the sample population that I pulled. And then I give a value to that particular modal age. And then I work through it. So again, here are some helpful qualitative terms that you should know when you're going through the quantitative analysis approach. Average, mean, and then mode, and then median. So average is a central tendency or the typical norm that exists within a population. Mean is the average computed by summing the values, which I just did. The mode is the average representing the most frequently observed. So let's say 16 has the mode, which is represented by 8. If we go back to what I originally said, that the mean was, the mode was 8 in the total respondents, then that would be my my number that I would choose for the selected population. And again, you can look at median. You're doing what the middle ground is, and you're ranking it by ranked order as you work through your statistical methodology. There is what we call is dispersion and standard deviation. Now we're getting even more deeper into statistical query or methodological approach, and this gets a little bit harder. So if you are more in the math and science area of your expertise, then quantitative methodology is the method you want to go down, especially if you're polling a large sample population. Then I would encourage you to go with the quantitative methodological approach rather than maybe qualitative. If you are working with a population that's about experience and phenomenon, and you're very descriptive in your wording, then you are probably going to like the qualitative design set, and we will talk about that in another week to come. Okay, so again, dispersion and standard deviation. We're looking at the values that are distributed around some central value that has been that emerges onto the scene based on your surveys that you have collected. So we can look at, again, averages that develop, the standard deviation, and then the measurements that are used around the mean. And again, you're expressing this in percentiles. 68 percentile of the cases will lie within a plus or minus phrase. 95, again, will lie within the 3 standard deviation, and you begin to group that out in terms that are both descriptive in analysis, but based on numbering a mathematical equation that exists. So there are, again, are types of variables, what we call discrete, which is qualitative. That's in the week to come. There's quantitative, which is continuous, and we are wrapping our minds around numbers. We're assigning numbers that have value, and values mean a lot in quantitative methodology. Please remember that. Values mean a lot in quantitative methodology. Words mean a lot in qualitative design methodology. Just know that they are separated in terms of their methodological design. In quantitative, we're looking at continuous, numerical, discrete variables. So we're looking at how far our population are going in terms of their thoughts and perceptions. They're in the line of social inquiry. We're looking at numerical discrete data as giving us value about what they believe to be true and how they express themselves on a given survey set. Again, continuous variable, numerical discrete, again, assigning a numerical value to that means a lot in quantitative methodology. Again, types of variables. We're looking at quantitatives, looking at quantity, how much. We're also looking at the who. We're also looking at the where. Where do they lie? Is there a geographical zone in order to get what we call generalizability? Are you sampling a huge population of the Midwest or the southern region? We want to know that as we're reading along. There's dichotomous, there's multi-economists, there's the score, there's the categorical score that we're assigning. Looking at how many again? Numerical, discrete. So if I can get this down into your mind before you walk out of this week, week number 2, that the variables and the numbers mean a lot in quantitative analysis. You are assigning a number, a percentile. So many said this, and you're then equating that out in percentage. Now, is it helpful to use percentages in qualitative? It may be so. For example, if you're looking at words association, that somebody said this in terms of ideas, it might be helpful to explain it in table forms. But again, we'll get to that in another week as we look at qualitative design theory. Now there's data transformation as we think about quantitative. So there's data reduction, and there's the creation of what we call composite variable or composite variables as we work through it. What is the makeup of my population, and how can I express this out in graphic form so that my reader understands not just what I'm expressing out in paragraph form, but what does my visual presentation look like. So let me show you a few of these sample based on my own research at my college that I do for the work in institutional research. So data representation, I may put this into what we call various table forms. I might use pie charts, I might use linear regression, I might use histogram, frequency, polygon. the list, scatter boxes, the list goes on. And so you can look at variable, nominal, and then ordinal and interval aspects and continuous formatting. So let's express this even further as we think about a pie chart. I give you an example of how our online credits are distributed at our school between the various locations and modalities. Again, a pie chart might be helpful, and again, you would express this out in narrative paragraph form. But again, the picture shows me who I'm dealing with in terms of the variable itself. Notice it's a geographical location. I might be looking at two cities, city B, city A, and the percentages there, and I might do it in a bar chart format rather than in a pie chart. I might show you trends, and here is a weekly trend line that's showing how our growth in credits are increasing each week, and I'm following that trend line. And now let's just say I look at the trend line and I see it peak down. Well, I need to know that, and I need to circle that, and I need to give that information out to my departments so they know, wait, in week number 12, there was a dip in credits, and we may want to know why, the why factor, and so we search that out to find that data. There's the bivariate rate analysis, and again, we're looking at two variables here by the word bi, and we're simultaneously looking for the purpose of determining the empirical relationship that exists between them. Again, we're looking at the two side by side, and we might look at it from a percentage table format. So again, let's take the gender quality of men and women, and how are they looking in terms of percentage between the two. So if I've done a survey and I've pulled both genders, I'm looking at what men said, I'm looking at both women, and I'm evaluating both in terms of percentage and the down factor. Now notice the percentage down factor is weighted at 100%, and I can use that equation to show again the percentage at 26 and 35 in terms of my respondents. We can also express this in other marginal tools, marginal way, such as tools or table setup that are helpful within Excel, and you can look at the different tool sets that are available for you. If you're not familiar with Excel, I would encourage you to go online and look at some helpful YouTube videos on setting up simple Excel charts, bar graphs, and etc. based on the data that you are bringing in from your surveys. And you can look at contingency tables here to help you work through this data set as well. Their descriptive analysis, this talks about a regressive plot line based on height and weight, and it shows you where the scattered plot line exists for this particular data set. We have two quantitative variables, what we call ordered pairs. This is looking at the X and Y factor, the input variable versus the output Y variable on the dependent variable scale. And you might look at this from a scattered diagram of ordered pairs versus what we talk about the bivariate data plot that exists within a coordinated axis system. I know I just said a mouthful there, but that's what it is as we think through the quantitative analysis piece as it relates to presenting your material in number format that can be expressed out in the most clear and concise and precise way, clear, concise, and precise way as it relates to your methodological design as it represents your dissertation. And then as you work through some more of the examples of involving, so let's say children's fear related to being hospitalized, the age, the score that they're showing based on the survey that was deployed in your research dissertation. Well, that ends the quantitative design methodological. There are more. We're not going to cover all of it, but you would do well to pull a good textbook, the one you're using right now for this class, and any other design methodological books out there from the books from Amazon you might want to purchase to help you work through what design methodology you want to employ for your research and how might it serve the readers that are reading your dissertation to know exactly what you're covering for your dissertation design. And at the end, quantitative is a strong design methodology that you can employ, and would encourage you to do so if you have a large population that you're sampling, and you can express these in a very helpful mathematical way to get at the emergent themes that lie within your population that you've chosen. I hope that helps. You can email me, call me. I'll be glad to set up a video chat with you to explain this even more if you're leaning more toward the quantitative, or after we get through the other course lectures, maybe qualitative design set is where you want to be for your particular research project. That would be it for this lecture, and I hope you're staying encouraged in God's Word and also through prayer, and you have finding the encouragement of God's people to help you through your research design.